Well, good morning, good afternoon, good day. Let's go with that. And welcome to the show, guys. I hope everyone is ready for an exciting time with our friends Brian Mitchell. Before we get started, I just want to make sure everything is the way it's supposed to be. We're a little behind. I apologize. What's up from Montreal? Anyways, as usual, because we're going to be talking with him, I wanted to kind of get this out of the way beforehand. Let me do this. I'll do that. And this show is brought to you by the fine folks at Audio Control. That's right. I know. Big shock. We love Audio Control. We hope you guys love them too. Make sure to head over to audiocontrol.com where you can find all the cool stuff that they make. One of the cool things that we're probably going to somehow hint on tonight is RTA. And they happen to make one. It's called the DM RTA. If you're interested in picking up an RTA to make your life a little bit easier while you're tuning a car, head over to audiocontrol.com and check them out. Now, this guest next is, if you guys haven't seen him in our videos, by all means, go back and watch it. If you haven't seen the video we've done on his Cadillac, please go watch that. You'll be amazed at the level of insanity that he has done. But without further ado, let's bring in Mr. Brian Mitchell. But before I do that, I'm going to just drop this overlay in place.
There you are. I can't hear you though.
Now you can.
Now I can.
Yeah, now you can. So sorry, I forgot to put on my shirt. I wanted to properly represent. Yeah, there we go. So
awesome shirt, by the way. Awesome shirt.
Yeah. Here we go. Look at that. This is the way. Yeah, that is funny. That is funny. Haley thanks you. She's glad she got it.
Awesome.
The Cadillac is the. Oh, here we go. I could actually just pop it up. The Cadillac is the reason I moved to ARC and dropped JL.
Well, I take that as a compliment. JL's got some awesome stuff. We'll be talking about a little bit of it today.
What's up, Paul? Hello, boys. Paul from Gerbermeister in the house. Hey, what's going on?
Hi, Paul.
So how you doing today? What do you got going on?
It is hot. It's 100. Well, it's 94 in the shop, and we're doing this from the shop because I was working. So I wanted to make sure that I got everything kind of set up real quick and got a table out, but I had a couple of projects in the background that we're working on. But overall, it is hot. That's my takeaway from today. Is it's really, really hot.
Yeah, I had to work outside for a good portion of the day, so I can appreciate the heat, as it were.
I think outside it's 106 today. So.
And you guys have that oven heat.
Yeah, it's like being in an oven.
Yeah, it's like when you open the oven, you just get blasted, and you're like, oh, that sucks. Because I remember that we were there, and it was like 114. He's coming to us from California, by the way. If you guys are going, where is he at? And it was like 114, and everyone was just miserable. And I'm just like, this is so weird, because you're just dry. It's just, it's just dry.
Except for the sweat.
Well, yeah, but even I don't sweat there. That was the problem. Yeah. See, like right now, I have all this reflection because my head has been, and you're nice and dry, or you have better lighting, one or the other.
I think I have better lighting.
I don't know, man.
Because I'm sweating.
Oh, okay. You're just doing better at it than I am.
I do have the back door of the shop open, so I'm going to apologize if there's any honking or anything else because it's just too hot to. Yeah.
We're next to a fire department, man. We get it all the time. Get it all the time. Yeah. Thank you for coming on to the show today, filling in for Fernando. I always love it when we get the opportunity to do DSP talk. And I mean, I'm guessing you know a little bit about DSP. For those of the people that haven't had the opportunity to kind of hear like your dossier, so to speak, let's just keep it combined to your competing side of things. You do work for ARC Audio. That's what do you do for ARC? What's your title?
I'm the inside sales manager, and everybody at ARC has multiple jobs. So I also take care of most of the U.S. training, travel with the team events and regular trade show events. So you see me at almost all the events that we do in the United States.
And then, of course, your competitive resume, I think, is more of the impressive one. Which, go ahead, lay it out.
Yeah. So I also have my shop, which the competitive side is based around the shop. So it's a small shop. I take very few cars on a year, probably 12, 15 cars maximum.
That many?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's some small jobs there, but and there's usually out of those, there's probably 4 projects here a year that are 2.5, 3, 4 months. So, and then from that comes the competitive side, which we started. Well, actually, I started competing in the early 90s. So 90, 91, I went to, really competing. I went to shows before that in the 80s. 86 was my very first show, the competition show, but I was so far out of my realm there that it was, not even worth mentioning. But yeah. But since 2012, I've won at least 1 world championship, and I'm averaging 5 championships per year. So that's IASCA, Mecca, USAC, and now EMA USA.
There we go.
And so we've won.
We're doing Emma. Quiet down. Quiet.
Yeah.
Not too loud.
Yep.
All right.
So we had, we've made a big deal about being able to compete in every organization and win. It gives us a little bit better feel for all the competition sides of it, and we have one tune for all of them. I mean, that's kind of a big deal for me. There is no IASCA tune or Mecca tune or Emma tune. It's just one tune. It's either right or it's not.
I can understand that. And speaking of the right tune, I had you on today because you know a lot about tuning and a lot about. I'm not going to say I'm going to use the term dumbing it down, but I like to say helping people understand what it is they've just gotten into. And I figured that'd be a great place for us to start, is that you just kind of lay it on us. I see a ton of tools behind there, but we don't necessarily have to start with the tools unless you want to. But I'm leaving this up to you. So let's go through it. Let's hit it.
So I have the tools, really for multiple reasons. One of the reasons being that a lot of people will go into a retail store and they'll want them to tune a car, and they either charge a lot, and this is one of the things why they charge a lot, is all this equipment's not cheap, and to do it right, you have to have some of it, not all of it necessarily. But then also we'll talk about some of the advantages, the different kinds of equipment that we have here. So we have the tried and true audio control 3055 that's been around for forever, probably longer than most of there's probably one sitting in the back of a store that's been there longer than everybody that's worked at the store has been alive.
I mean,
or close.
Yeah. And if anybody wants one, I know somebody who has one for sale right now.
and if that's what you can afford, it's actually a really good piece.
There's plenty of shops that's like their go-to piece.
Yeah. And then on the other side of that is the newest and greatest technology, the JL Audio Tune Max that uses the Tune 5 software, Tune 4.5, whatever it is. That is the newest, greatest piece of equipment, but with a much higher learning curve. So if you want to use that, it does some awesome tuning. But there's a learning curve. So make sure that you schedule some weekends for playing with it if you want to drop that kind of money on it, or if the shop that is going to use it has put in the time to learn it. So just like with anything that has great power, it comes great responsibility. So
easy, easy.
But then you have some other tools. We have a digital multimeter. This is a real fancy one, but digital multimeter, because if you're doing OEM integration and tuning, then you need to you need to be able to check voltages, check whether the amplifier is actually putting out the kind of power that you think it is. We have this cool Steve Mead meter, so you can check. You can do Thiel small parameters. Again, if you're getting into the nitty gritty of trying to get everything you can out of a tune.
I feel like that tool is a tweeter's best friend.
It is. That tool is a tweeter's best friend.
I mean, without that tool, like, the one thing we use that for religiously is finding an FS of a tweeter.
Correct.
And it's like, because most manufacturers, they don't even know. Like, if you call them up, hey, what? No. Yeah. Why do you need that? Just use the passives. It's
right.
Like,
yeah. And we try not to do passives if we can help it. Active is a better way of going. It's much more exact. And Steve Mead has a bunch of cool tools that Diamore designed, and all of them are pretty cool. I really like all of them. Then we also have the DMRTA, brought to you from Audio Control, which we talked about at the beginning of the thing. Our friends at Audio Control.
Hey, these guys?
Yeah, Audio Control.
Yeah, audiocontrol.com.
I love giving everybody a shout out for things that they do really good, and Audio Control.
Proud sponsor of the show. Thank you, Alex.
Really a good piece that gets you into tuning that does a lot of different things in one small box.
Well, okay, so the one thing I don't see there from Audio Control, which I know you travel with, is your iTest mic.
I do have the iTest mic. Yeah. So
because
for just getting in quick and down and dirty, which I do a lot of, I'll go to a show and there'll be 5 or 6 guys there who have just barely got everything installed, and they're a little frazzled, maybe trying to get the car wiped down. And, I see High Five Vega asking where this is.
Exactly. I'm like, it's right there.
I saved the best for last, I guess, right? I mean, this is a little baby.
Yeah. Dude, you got a pre-production. So you got one of the 10 pre-production models.
Yeah.
You got to see that. You also got to see that before everybody, because that was last year. It was still a hope and a dream, but it came in a really cool package. And you were just like, can I take this one? I was like, this is the only one we have. No. He's like, I want it as soon as you can get it to me. I was like, okay.
Well, this is awesome for OEM integration. If you don't have one of these for OEM integration, whether you're a store or an end user that's trying to do his own tuning and wants to use the factory radio, this is a must-have. I mean, this is right there with the multimeter. It's a must-have. All the guys out there, one of those keywords out there is all pass filters, and trying to locate an all pass filter. This is the tool to use to find those. And if you can't find them, then you're just, your tuning could be shots in the dark because you have some all pass filter on one side that you gotta get around. Now, it also will probably help you determine that there's not an all pass filter in every single car, because
that's more the hope.
Yeah, a lot of keywords are overused, and that's one of them that is potentially overused, especially when they think they have an all-pass filter in 2009 car. There wasn't broad use of that until probably 2015, 16, and then started out with the Bose cars and then Toyotas.
Well, and to quote a friend of ours, and this is to quote his exact words, if you don't have a device to measure, if you don't have an electrical RTA measurement, you're not a real installer. That would be McNulty.
Yes.
Yes.
And he also said that having one does not make you a professional.
No, But you can't be one without it. So if you're aspiring to be one, you have to have an electrical RTA measuring device. I, of course, responded, how many would you like?
Yes, there you go.
Because when they were going, I have 3, I go, jump.
Well,
I got boxes.
As you can see, one of my vices is electronics. More so because a lot of people call me and ask me if they can help them with a problem, and I get that call 2 or 3 times a day. So I like to know how most of the test equipment works, so I have a working understanding of it. And the same with software and other things, even though it may not be something that I have to deal with. A lot of my friends or customers, if I can answer the question for them, I do.
Well, just to ease people's strain in the comments, is most people know that watch the show regularly. When Fernando's not on the show, it means he's got a day off, and he's in sunny Pittsburgh, Philly area. He's in Pennsylvania right now at a wedding. Therefore, the substitute, even though he's a little paler than Fernando, is our good friend Brian. So thank you, Brian, for coming on. Hey, before we dig deeper into this, let's just let's give out a tip right away. Just like a new guy walking in, just a Brian tip. So just to kind of jump ahead to give them, to feed them a piece of candy. What's one of your quick tips that you love to give to that you pass along?
The biggest tip, I think, is time alignment, in that you can use a lot of different techniques to get a center image. My opinion is that the center image should be in the center of the car, not over the steering wheel. The reason for that is so the stage is the same on the left as it is right. Everything from on both sides of that center image are the same. But you can use click tests, click pops, full range, pink noise pops that pop, and you can put them all together and get your center image there. Or you can use a vocal track. Like if I'm doing a down and dirty quick ear tune, I have a CD that I use that's on burnt to the phone now, of course, that has a Johnny Cash song. I don't carry a CD in my back pocket anymore. I used to.
That Johnny Cash song. Hey, back to the click pops. If you'd like to get your own, if you're an iTunes user, or if you have a service, Sheffield Labs, the My Disc, you can download, and that's what I've found to be the best polarity pulse track. You probably have yours that you love.
I actually have a friend, Ken Ward. We know him from Educar, who has an app that has.
But he doesn't do click pops on them. But he doesn't do clicks.
He doesn't, but he does have some center frequency tones.
Yes.
That work pretty good too. So I use his a lot, especially for doing testing. So I like that one because it's on my phone. And
if you'd like to learn more about Educar,
yeah. Yeah. I like to point out there's a lot of really smart people in our industry, and I don't think that car audio installers get quite the recognition that they deserve. You have to be an upholsterer, you got to be an electrician, you got to be a metal fabricator. If you have all those skills and you worked in any other industry, you'd be called Superman. But in ours, we just call us an installer.
So here's the Test and Tune app up on the page.
Yep.
And like you have left, right, M, left minus right, or left and right. But you have here's your
mono.
I know. I'm giving you a hard time. It's manual in my world, but that's a whole nother world. Yeah. Manual. P is pro, M is manual. You guys that get that, you'll be all right. So then you have the center mono track, and then or center pink noise, bass, mid. How would you use this to do what you're describing? What would be your process for getting into a car?
Yeah, so if I get into the car, one of the very first things I do is check see if left and right are correct. It's a really easy one to get wrong, especially if you're in a hurry. You can't see where you're plugging in RCAs. If you've done one of these cool amp racks that maybe the wiring's a little bit more complicated on. If you don't have left and right correct, then everything else is going to be bad if you're using musical tone, musical tracks to tune with. You'll always second guess yourself trying to put placement somewhere. So the very first thing I do is I check to see if left and right are correct. And then I'll turn on the center and see if it's anywhere close to being center from whatever has been done. Generally, I turn off everything that somebody else has already done and start from scratch. It's usually faster for me. I'm not chasing the dragon that somebody else has already been chasing for hours and days.
Right.
So then I can, most modern DSPs, you can drag everything, over. The ones that are still using buttons make it a little bit more difficult, but if it has a slider, it works great.
So you like sliders? Okay.
Like sliders.
Nice. You're a White Castle guy. I see how you are. Their fries only come in one size.
Right. now, of course, yeah. Now, if you're doing a head unit that has a DSP in it, and it just happens to be made by a Japanese manufacturer, they look at their algorithm works the opposite. So you don't put it in the same way that you do a standalone DSP, like any of the high-end DSPs. Even though those work great, the ones in the head units actually work pretty good nowadays. But generally, you put the delay in on the passenger side versus the driver side, and it does all the math for you. So if you're ever trying to get a center image and you're using the built-in DSP, just try flipping it around and doing what you would normally think was the right way, but do it on the other side.
Which is really nice when using the pop track, because typically what I'll do is if we're going to do time delay on a head unit, let's say it's a Pioneer. Pioneer loves to do that stuff backwards. Is I'll start adjusting the driver's side playing the pop track, and if nothing happens, then I'll put it back to 0, go to the passenger side, and start doing. And then if it does this,
yeah,
okay, it's weird. All right,
that's weird, but as long as it works, I mean, it's more about of the DSP tuning on just a regular everyday basis is just knowing where the buttons are. If you don't know where the buttons are or what they do, you can, the learning curve takes hours and hours and hours. And as a customer, you don't want to pay for a dealer to have that learning curve on your dime, which most of them don't. But to get a good tune, it's having a DSP that they're comfortable with. If you walk into a shop and they want to use a specific DSP, you'll probably get a better outcome if you use that DSP versus trying to cherry pick one that they haven't ever used before.
Kind of falls back to like in the 90s when everyone was putting in alarm systems. Like if you went to a shop and you walked in with an Alpine alarm and they sell Viper, you're turning around and walking back out of the store because that installer doesn't want anything to do with that alarm.
Yep.
He wants his red, blue, green, brown, very, very basic.
Yep. They're comfortable with one way of doing it, and you're going to, they probably do Vipers and they work great, and whatever it is. So I always do recommend that if they want to go to a different DSP than what the dealer is comfortable with, then they should look for a tuner maybe outside of that shop. Which if you're having somebody build you high end car, hopefully they're able to do the tuning for you as well. So
let's be honest, so we know that's not always the case.
Correct, it's not. And if they say they can't, don't try to push them to do it, because they're being honest with you, and take that honesty, with how they're giving it to you. They're just wanting to make sure that you get a good outcome.
Yeah, I mean, that was my morning today. Like, it was funny because you told me I'll be spending my morning tuning cars, and then I got in this morning and there was a guy with an F-250 here for me to tune it. And I'm like, did we do it? And they're like, no, but we're the only ones that know how to work a DSR-1. So he's like, yeah, this guy said he knew how to use it. He didn't know. I opened it up on my phone and he didn't do anything. He just set the crossovers. And I was like, oh, okay. So, I got to go through the whole thing. And
we get a lot of those. And that's one of the reasons why if I get in and I'm working on anybody else's processor, anybody else's work that I didn't do the work, I usually save all of their work so I can go back to it if I need to, or if they want to know what the difference was. I always try to use it as a learning experience for whoever I'm helping out, and say, here's what I saw, and this is how you can go forward with it, because it's definitely not 100% tune at that point. You might be able to get them up to 70%. I'm pretty good. I can probably get most people up to 80% with my ear. But if you don't have all of the other tools that you need to use, it's just like working on a car and any other mechanic, situation. If you need the tools to do it right, and you might be able to get it working, but to get 100% out of it or 95% out of it, you need to have the tools for that.
Now, speaking of tools for that, Jeff Smith was up this week, and we had some time to play on this car out of frame here. And he took me out in his car, and he has an ARC processor in there right now. And he wanted to show it to me. I didn't realize that from your DRC, you can do everything. Like you can do it all.
Yeah, so the processing power in our PSC, the controller, is almost exactly what the DSP and the amplifier is. It does all 31 bands or 37 bands of EQ per channel.
Yeah.
It does crossovers. It does output trim. It does everything except for setup. You can't do setup from it. You have to do that with a computer. But after that's in, you can do it all from there. Now, I'll be honest with you, it would be a nightmare to try to tune it from scratch using that screen.
Oh yeah, it's very small, but it was still impressive that you meant that they squeezed all of that into there. I was like, holy crap!
Yeah, it's basically a laptop talking to a DSP that's this big on your screen. It's pretty cool.
We'll take this one because it does pertain to ARC instead of talking about Brian. How does the ARC KS KAR class GH amplifier sound compared to the ARC signature amps? I can't physically fit signatures, so I'm looking at other ARC amps. Any thoughts on that?
So it's kind of difficult to compare the different topographies of amplifiers that we have. They all are really, really good and standouts in their class. The SEs were designed, I think they were designed like 19 years ago, and they've been on the market for at least 17 years. So, wow. Those are, the guys who are always talking about old school amps and how much they're better than everything else. We still make them. I mean, the SEs are that amplifier. They were made back in the old school days. So with that though, also goes some of the old school things like efficiency. Efficiency is low because it's got big outputs on them, and the footprint is big. So the amplifiers physically are bigger. The KS with the GH power supplies in them are the next generation kind of that. So like the KS 602, which is our newest one in that line. So now we have three amplifiers. We used to have 5. We have the 302, 304, and 602. The 602 is as close to an SE and a GH as you could probably get. Uses a lot of the same parts, things like that. So when we make an amplifier, we make an amplifier that is the best amplifier that we can make using the topography that we're making. So most companies have a good, better, best, and we don't really have a good, better, best. We have, this is the best D-class amplifier that we can make. This is the best class D amplifier with a built-in DSP that we can make. This is the best class GH amplifier that we can make. This is the best class AB amplifier that we can make. And it's a little different because you start looking at amplifiers as in what does the job that I need it to do versus which one is cost the most money. So when people ask me, they ask a lot whether or not the class D amplifiers, how are they versus the SEs? And I still think that the SEs as an old school, high bias, almost class A bias amplifier when you have comp mods on them, Still probably edge it out, but it's so close now that I build cars sometimes and I put different amplifiers in it just to see if I can hear a difference. And I have a really well-trained ear, and it's hard for me to tell the difference in almost every single application.
Oh, so that's one of those questions. Do you think you could hear a difference between an A beak and a D?
Yeah. Me and Fred in the office can. Brad might be able to. He's been hearing loud music and is testing a lot more than we have. But he's got a great ear too. But you have to be really on it to be able to hear the difference, and you have to put a track in that you know really well, and it's usually high frequency, some high frequency noise that you hear. But I'd say I don't know of anybody that's not well trained in their hearing that could hear the difference between a Class A, B, and a Class D amplifier, and a good Class D amplifier, not just random Class D amplifiers.
All right.
And there's a lot of good Class D amplifiers out there. There's not just us. There's some other manufacturers out there that do a good job. So
yeah. All right. Well, thank you for answering that question. Back to DSP talk. All right. So what else you got for us today? All right. Now at Knowledge Fest, you did a training of the 10 things that to do, don't do. And one of those was talking about frequencies, specific frequencies that are kind of like, you need to pay attention to these.
Correct. It's 7 or 8 frequencies. And again, if I'm doing a down and dirty tune, and I use that a lot because there's a difference when I'm just getting in and I'm using my ears. That gives, if you remember these frequencies, and it's a lot easier to remember those versus 37 other ones. Even me, this one does, and this one's minor differences between them. It'll help you walk through the system reasonably quickly and get it to a, there was a reason why everybody did a smiley face, because if you did it enough times, that gave you an acceptable curve for most people to listen to back in the day. That doesn't happen now, but back in the day it did. That's why they always did it, because more people were happy with that curve.
Yeah.
So I have some frequencies, and usually that the frequencies are some feedback from your customers sometimes. So 8K, 10K is if it sounds like you have a snake in the car, lots of S's and everything. Sort of like me with my little tooth thing that I got going on right now. I have lots of S's in my voice. That's
suffering succotash.
Exactly. That's you have too much 8K, and all of the frequencies that I'm talking about are places that you're going to drop the frequency. You're not going to boost the frequency. So another thing to keep in mind. But 8 or 10K. So if those are up, it's also really fatiguing. 5K on female vocals is where she gets really screechy. So when she's singing and she gets into the higher register, it'll pierce your head and feel like the Thundercats are coming, and the.
Now, when you're talking drop it, are we talking like half a dB, a full dB, 3 dB, or these just were specifically listening to drop these?
It's just specifically where to listen to drop these. I try not to do any big drops unless it's something just horribly out of whack. I do 1/10 of a dB, 1/4 dB at the most at a time, because a lot of times you can drop it so much that you take care of that, but you also drop a frequency around it that didn't have a problem.
Okay.
So that's my rule of thumb is no more than 1/4 dB at any one time, unless I'm looking at an RTA and I see some huge mountain of a boost or something.
Okay.
And then so you got 5K, and that's piercing. Most of these upper frequencies are when you're listening to a car and it becomes fatiguing. These are the frequencies that do this more than anything else. The high frequencies will really deafen your ears after a short period of time. Your brain just turns them off, and it starts giving you a headache because your brain's telling you, hey, get the hell out of there because something's wrong.
People pay extra for those things. You know that, right?
And they do, and there are some people that are already deaf in those frequencies. So,
You're breaking every horn tweeter's, like every rule of the horn tweeter world, man. Cut 5,000? What?
And well, that's good. There are customers who are hard of hearing in those frequencies because maybe they worked in an industry where those frequencies have caused some hearing damage. And so I for my final tunes, I always have a customer or the owner of the car, or whoever's having me do this tuning, get in the car afterwards, because if they say something is not good in a certain place, they need more. They usually use those kind of expressions. Then I know where to look, and knowing where to look from your customer's response is important. If you don't know where to look from whatever they're telling you, then you can't fix it.
Yes. Yeah. No, it was funny. I had a guy one time, he comes in, he says, my girlfriend keeps telling me my car is making this whining noise. I can't hear it. And I get into the car, and Jesus Christ, it literally was like, and I was like, you can't hear that? And he's like, no. I'm like, you've been making your girlfriend drive around with that? And he's like, yeah. I was like, give me your keys now. Holy shit.
Now, how come when you said that, I was expecting you to get in and say it was her, but...
Well, I mean, I'm sure there was a certain amount of excitement involved in her, but yeah, no, that was way worse. That was way worse. All right, so 5,000. What do we got after that?
5,000, then 1K. 1K is a shouty. If somebody sounds like they're shouting when they're singing, and there's one person in the middle of your car and they're shouting at you instead of singing to you, that's usually 1K. And we're very, very sensitive at 1K. So when you make a change at 1K, I recommend no more than 0.2 of a dB at the very, very most, because little differences can actually make a big difference there. So if you take that down too much, you'll lose all of the presence of the singer in the middle.
Oh, okay. That's good
because
to know.
1K is where our hearing is the most sensitive, is right there. So
yeah, which is kind of funny because, like, I mean, I don't know if you've ever paid attention, which I'm sure you have, but a lot of the times car manufacturers actually boost 1K.
They do.
And it's always funny because that's the when you're doing a distortion detection at 1,000 hertz, and the car's already boosted it, and then you're doing a 5 dB boost on that. It's like, that's why I always tell people, like, dude, you can't always do this with factory radios unless you've looked at the electrical signal to make sure that it is in line with everything to the right and left of it. Because if it has a boost or a dip that's already there, and you're using that to set your gains, you can run into some trouble really quick.
Yeah, no, that's why I always tell everybody, before you do anything, check it on an RTA. Check the actual electrical measurements before you start. It's one of the problems with setting gains with a digital multimeter. I am totally against using a digital multimeter to set gains, because it can't tell you where clipping is and the rest of the signal chain that you're using. So most of the time they say, oh, put a 1K tone in and set your gains with that. Well, that works great at 1K, but what if there's a boost at 2.5, or there's a huge boost in the mid bass like there is on a motorcycle? So if you set your gain to maximum output of the amplifier at 1K, and then your mid bass is boosted, then you just blew up all your speakers. So,
right, and we're talking about a factory signal, not an aftermarket radio that's flat.
Correct. Correct. And factory signal. If you're aftermarket, good Kenwood, Alpine, Pioneer, Sony, my favorite, but it's all those are going to be a reasonably good flat signals. As long as the radio itself works, it's fine.
Yeah.
So the next one's down from there. The 500 is, which I saw somebody just
that's 500. D hates 500.
A lot
that's
of
a
cars.
Personal thing.
Yeah, a lot of cars 500 is actually boosted quite a bit.
It just gets so ringy. It's like
it's usually from speaker locations.
You
get a lot of cars with speaker locations. You'll get a ringing off the glass, and that'll be at 500. So that's where that comes into play. But my personal my personal favorites. If I had to go on a game show and only pick two frequencies to make a car sound better, it's almost always 250 and 315.
Why is that?
They're way overused in some parts of the world. They give you a fullness to the vocals, and everybody likes a full male vocal. You know, it sounds good, but in doing so, it almost always takes away all of the impact. So the snap, and I'm a big believer in that snap, which is at 200 and 160. So that's usually a crossover frequency where you're at. So it could affect the mid bass and the mid range. And so you have to play with that a little bit and really get it to blend well to get that snap correct. But if you have 250 and 315 turned up, people will do that and they say, I need that snap, and they'll turn those up. And what happens is it's a masking frequency. So if this frequency above it is higher, you can't hear the one directly below it. It's just covering it up. It's so loud that it covers it up. And the same works for the other side. If it's too high, you can't hear the one in front of it. So those two are someplace that when they're doing their initial tune, they almost always turn those up. And when people get into my cars, everybody has a similar reaction. You know, I have a signature tune, I guess it is. But people will say, oh, I bet Brian tuned this one because it's so clear. And it with 250 and 315 turned up, it almost is like it blurs the sound. And obviously that can't happen because it's two different things. It's not optical, it's audio, or, you know, audio. So, but it makes the sound not as clear. You don't hear the detail, and there's a lot of detail right in that area right there.
Yeah. Well, you know, it was funny when we were sitting at Knowledge Fest and we were tuning Chris's car, and we were working on the bass part of it, which turned out to be the battery issue instead of. And I was like, and I said, I just give me a little bit more here, and the simple solution would have just been you go and just to let me hear a little bit more, but you immediately started pulling these three other frequencies down. And I was like, okay, you found the hardest way to do it. Let's, you know, so.
But it's not though, because in turning that up, 160 and 200, that's a crossover frequency area most of the time. And if you turn those up, well, then you affect the frequencies below it. And so then the bass doesn't sound right. And so turning these down, so you get a gentle slope down to the flat where you want the flat on your curve, is much more desirable than just trying to boost these up, because then you still have somewhere where there's like a, you know, a cliff that you're going to fall off and something's going to be missing there.
Now, since we were talking about crossover, let's kind of touch on that. Oh no, are we done with the frequencies?
No, 50 hertz.
Oh, we'll come back to the crossover then. Okay. 50 hertz. Yeah, what's wrong with 50 hertz, bro?
50 hertz is awesome. It is. It's the loudest frequency in the car usually. And if that is so much louder than everything else, you can't hear the low end bass. And so in a typical sound quality car, something that you're looking for accurate reproduction of the sound, 50 hertz is almost always too loud in the car. If you're doing, you know, you want to beat down the street and you want to get as much energy as the amplifier can put out, and you want a small bandwidth, then leave 50 where it's at. But a lot of times 50 will be overpowering, and not overpowering all the time, so you can't just lower the bass. But if you take 50 down, then usually all of the frequencies on the bass sound better, and so you get better sounding bass across the whole spectrum versus just output from 50 hertz. So I mean, 50 hertz is the free bass that you get from putting it in a car. You know, when you're you know.
I just want you to know you said free bass.
Free bass.
Maybe later after the show. Yeah. Depends on how the night goes. I can Richard Pryor it up. Yeah. It's not free. It costs you your whole damn house.
It costs you everything. Yeah. So I mean, it's definitely one of those places where for a good, you're welcome, Haley. It's one of those places where if you want the bass to sound better, then 50, 60 hertz is usually what needs to be cut a little bit. So and bass is Chewy is at the shop.
I was gonna say, I'm sure he's there somewhere.
Yep, they're napping. Their pool's almost set up. So
nice.
So that's it on frequencies.
All right, so let's jump over into crossovers real quick. You have a preferred method of crossover that isn't necessarily what everyone else likes to use. You do a thing called gapping.
Correct. From years and years and years ago, I've been doing this a long time. I just learned that way, and I've had pretty good success with it. I always say that if you have good success with something else, then use something else. I'm not a Nazi about how you tune a car.
Bro, what's wrong with the Nazis? Why are you ripping on the Nazis, man? There might be one in the live.
I'll punch a Nazi.
So let's talk about what is it.
So I like to give a little bit of gap, and when you give a little bit of gap on a crossover, if you're looking at a frequency chart, you'll have a little bit where the frequency here rolls off, and you want it to roll off about 3 dB on both sides. So, and then when the two speakers interact and they interact properly, naturally they propagate, the sound waves do, and you get a nice flat frequency response. And each one of the speakers is rolled off in a reasonable amount, so they're not overworking. They don't have to play down to a frequency that's a little bit lower, so you can get a more accurate sound out of each speaker. But it's less EQ that you have to do that way. You don't have to, if you cross them over both at the same spot. So if they're both crossed over at, let's say 400 hertz for, 3.5 inch speaker or something, and you cross the mid bass over at 400 and you cross 3.5 at 400, that frequency range where they're together, in most times you're going to get a peak that you'll have to EQ down. Now you have plenty of EQ, you can do it that way, but the blend usually doesn't blend as good. So and as far as crossover types, I'm a 24 dB Linkwitz Riley crossover person on everything but the bass. And unless the bass is in front of you, and again, these are rules. There's always some rule that can be broken. If you have good test equipment, maybe you can find a crossover point that's slightly different on each side. But if you're using the tune, the max, there is some ways to do that. But very rarely are you doing that by ear or even with a regular RTA. But on bass, I like 12 dB Linkwitz Riley, and I've used a 6 dB if I'm trying to get more energy in the front. Usually, if I do that, usually if I do that though, it's not Linkwitz Riley. It'll be a
Butterworth.
The other one, Butterworth. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, the syrup.
The syrup. But you can get a little bit better blend if you got a weak mid bass in the front, or if you have. It's not usually weak. It's usually being masked by a door panel with small openings, so it doesn't get all the energy out of the door panel.
Well, we've talked about that. The first thing you do is you cut the hole out in front of the speaker and get as much air through into the car as you can.
If you can, for sure. But if you're doing this on a competition side of it, that's not always an option because there are rules that you have to fit into. And
rules.
Yeah, that's why I hate rules. That's why I like where I'm at in the competition circuit where there's no rules.
Rules are made to be broken. Yeah. So now back to the crossover thing for a minute. One of the advantages of using a Linkwitz Riley crossover is that that bump in the crossover typically doesn't happen with the 24, the Linkwitz 24, but you've seen that as a kind of a pain in the butt in your practices. So how far are you gapping them?
It's not much. It's usually an octave, so or a quarter octave. and not
Okay.
an octave, quarter
I
octave.
was gonna say an octave. That's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot. If I'm doing 6 dB, I might go an octave.
Yeah.
But I have crossover points that I like, and they work for most speakers. They don't work for all speakers because every once in a while I'll get into a car that has some really, really nice speakers in it, and they have a different like of crossovers than I'm used to, and then I have to change my whole way of thinking again.
So what is your typical? There again, these are just Brian's random crossover points. But where do you like to start?
On a 3-way, we'll go with a 3-way. That's my typical setup here. Tweeter is going to be 5,000 up or 5,500 up. If I do 5,500, then usually I'll do 5,000 down, or on the low side of the mid-range, and
Okay.
go from 200 to 5,000 on the mid-range.
Okay.
And mid-bass, I go from, if I do a 200, I usually do 180 or 190 down to 75. And very, very rarely do I go below 75 now.
Right.
And then subwoofer.
So I mean that gap is almost non-existent. I mean it's very
yeah, it's very,
small
very
gap.
small. Yeah, it's very small.
Okay.
And it gets less as you go down the frequency range. So
Yeah.
there's the sound waves are longer. So I feel like I get a better better tune that way. And if with such a small frequency range to use for a mid bass, it's hard to do much more than that. I would probably get a better result if I was doing home audio, where I had speakers that played a much bigger frequency range. Instead of a 3-way for a mid bass, I'd probably play that mid bass up to 400 probably in the home, but it doesn't work very well in a car. So
right.
Now a 2-way, I go from about 4,000 up on the tweeter and 3,750 down.
So you like those high crossover points, huh?
I do.
Yeah.
I never blow a speaker
though. No, you don't.
Never blow a speaker.
Okay, Nick. I mean, Brian.
Never blow a speaker. And I get pretty good results out of it too. So.
Hey man, I mean you're okay. You're okay. Don't hurt your shoulder. Pat. Anyway. All right. So I see in the comments somebody's octave. For those of you that like don't, can you explain what an octave is? Because I feel this is a term that we throw out a lot, and a lot of people just don't really, they don't understand. And so it's a basic term. I get it, but what is an octave, and how do you figure out what an octave is, or how would you say? So we'll keep it simple. What is an octave above and below 1,000?
2,000 or 500.
There you go. So it's a
doubling or half. Yeah, doubling or half. So and that will change based on the frequency. So there's not a set. It's just wherever the frequency is. If you want to go an octave above that, then it's double, and if you want to go below that, it's half. So
which, when looking at a sound chart, if you take the natural course, if you say, okay, so 30 an octave is 60, 60 an octave is 120, then 240, and then 480, and then so it like 1,000, you have 2,000, 4,000, 8,000, and then it just keeps getting tighter and tighter and tighter. But there's like, if you think of like 8,000, 16,000 is an octave. That's a huge amount of sound in that one octave, as opposed to 30 to 60. How does that cause issues for us when we're setting up a car?
Oh, I mean,
take that, Brian. I'm gonna sit down. All right, go ahead.
If I had that answer, let me count the waves. The car again. When they said installers, they should have said superheroes, because the theory of relativity, I think, has less possible outcomes.
I would agree with that, especially in our industry with the going on, moving forward.
You have everything from beaming, how tight the frequencies are, to how much beaming there is, and how important the aiming the speaker is. It comes into play in reflections and how long it takes for a sound wave to either propagate off of the glass, which makes it louder, propagates, doubling it, making it louder, not necessarily doubling it, but making the sound wave louder, or negating it, like if it hits carpet or hits a diffuser. So those are just a couple of the different things that happen in those frequency ranges, depending on what they are. The 50 hertz, the free bass is from transfer function of the car, that sound wave hitting the car and corner loading like you would in a home. All of these are just different different parts of that that equation, and all of the best equipment has to be able to do that math, and that's why big companies are so good at doing odd things. Bose, I'm not a huge Bose fan for what they're selling, but some of their technology and what they've done with small speakers and computer peripheral people that take this little speaker that's this big and they make it have bass. It's amazing. So but they have computers that can crunch those numbers, and the reason why it's much more difficult in a car is because you have all of the natural numbers of things that has to happen, and those are big numbers, big huge numbers. But then you have the interaction between the glass, and it's like the worst place unless you went into like an ice castle or something and tried to do audio in there.
All right, that'll be our next thing. We're going to an ice castle. Well, hey Brian, believe it or not, that takes us to the end of the show, man. It's awesome. We're tapped out. I don't even think we've scratched the surface. Are you opposed to coming back on? I know.
No, not a problem.
All right.
Yeah, each thing could be an hour, just one.
Oh, I know, and I'm perfectly fine with that because I've rested my vocal cords, so I'm good. I'd like to thank you so much for coming on and taking time out of your busy schedule of tuning cars today to join us, and hopefully you guys got something out of this. I'm going to tell you right now, those frequencies that they laid down for you, that is gold. Go back, watch that as many times, write it down, take notes, put it on a card and put it in your wallet. If you're stumped, just start playing with those. It's a great place to start. The other day when Jeff was here, he literally used your two lower frequencies that you just talked about, and he took this car to a level. I was like, oh, what did you do? He's like, I just moved these two little sliders. And I was like, yep, that's what we needed to do. And it changed everything. It was quite magical. And we earlier today, the 5,000 we were just sitting in the car, and I was like, all right, we got to go back. Went outside, adjusted 5,000 a little bit, took it down because it was, when we coupled the speakers together, it just went up through the roof, and it was like, holy Jesus. So we reeled that fish back into the boat, and it was like, there we go. So that stuff is gold.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was so nice. So thank you so much for coming on. Hey guys, it's Saturday night. So you know what that means. It means it's the weekend. Everyone's going to go out and have fun. We'll be back here Monday, of course. Fernando will be back in town. He'll be back from PA. So excited. Woo! But yes, make sure to stay tuned till Monday. We'll be back, and so we have all next week, and then we're on vacation the week after. So I really can't wait. I'll be flying over you as we head to places unknown. I'll wave. Hi. But hey guys, make sure to tune in Monday, and of course always tune in on Instagram. If you're interested in picking up the electrical RTA that we talked about on the show so that you can become a real installer according to McNulty, I'll put that on a shirt. I'm going to put that on a shirt. It says McNulty says you have to own an electrical RTA, so buy the IRTA too. Why not? That's it. That's all I got. Thank you guys so much for coming on. You guys have a great weekend. We'll see you later next time. Bye.